I think that the original question you asked is, what's wrong with peacefully protesting, right? Nothing's wrong with peacefully protesting. It's just that peaceful protests have not worked. They haven't changed anything. They haven't caused a an overhaul of our law enforcement agencies, where there has been systemic racism in these departments for as far back as they go. And I can say this because my father was a police officer, and my father was a racist, and my father was a bigot. And he was open about that with us as kids. When I say systemic, I mean there's a lot of infiltration in these police departments where, first of all, it's a blue club, right? It's like a family. And you don't tell on your brother and you don't tell on your sister. You have each other's back. And in a lot of these neighborhoods of disenfranchisement and inequality and people that have been held down for generations, and it's a lot harder for them to get a leg up, and they are kind of corralled in these neighborhoods since the era of slavery, where they don't have the same opportunities as other people like me and like you. Police officers, police departments, sheriff's departments, they have a quota to fill. You know, they have a certain amount of arrests to make. They have a certain amount of drug arrests to make. There's a certain amount of people to pull over to fill this quota. They're not going onto Wall Street and pulling over a bank executive for having a bunch of cocaine in his pocket. They're going into the ghettos and they're picking on these disenfranchised people of color. This has been happening for hundreds of years. And they've been telling us that this has been happening for hundreds of years. And nothing has changed. You know, you can go far back in history and you can go to the peaceful protests of Martin Luther King, who he was murdered too. He was peacefully protesting. What did it change? Some civil rights laws that were passed. But the systemic part of it hasn't changed. You see it every single day. I mean, when I started really paying attention to politics, I think the first one that really caught my eye was Trayvon Martin. And at the time I had a son his age. And I was watching I was listening, I think it was, on the footage of this police department saying, "Don't follow him. What are you doing? Just stay in your car. If you think there's something suspicious, we'll send the police department out." Now, this guy was a wannabe police officer, so he actually wasn't an actual officer, but those officers had his fucking back. As soon as they got there and found this kid dead with Skittles and an iced tea in his hand, there was an outcry from people saying this is unacceptable, and nothing happened to that guy. He got off. So that started this awareness in a lot of people, because social media had started and we were starting to see and hear the things that we've been told for decades with our own ears and our own eyes. And for a lot of people, that's what it takes, right? And then there was Eric Garner, who was selling loose cigarettes on the street or something. And he was confronted by police officers who put him in a chokehold. He was no threat. He wasn't doing anything to provoke them to put him in a chokehold. And he was literally gasping for breath and saying, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe." And we watched him die. And those officers got away with it. No indictment. And they kept on coming. And it was like one after another. It was Michael Brown, 6 bullets in the back while running away. No indictment. Laquan McDonald, I think they shot him 16 times or something like that. That was a rare indictment. Then there was Tamir Rice, and Tamir Rice was 12 years old, and he was playing in the park with a toy pellet gun. The officer that pulled up literally shot and killed him within 3 seconds. 3 seconds. And no indictment. Walter Scott, 8 shots fired. Another rare conviction. Freddie Gray, handcuffed and shackled. No seatbelt. Found 45 minutes later with his spine severed. Died a week later. No charges against the officers. Time after time, if the police, the government, the people in power, if they don't hold up their end of the bargain, these things happen, and there's an outcry, and there are marches and peaceful protests and rallies and people standing up and saying, we're not going to take it anymore. Something needs to change. And then another person's killed. James Clark, unarmed, shot in the head, no charges. Alton Starling, selling CDs, confronted by police, fatally shot, no charges filed. Philando Castile, sitting in his car, gets pulled over. I have a legal registered firearm. I'm not reaching for it, just so you know. His girlfriend and his little child were in the car, fatally shot him. Stephen Clark, in his grandmother's backyard, shot 20 times by officers who claimed that his cell phone was a weapon. I mean, Breonna Taylor, wrong house. No reason to be there. Broke into her house. Her boyfriend, legal registered firearm, tries to shoot back because he has no idea who's coming into the house, and she's shot 8 times in her bed and killed. These things happen every day to people of color and people who are disenfranchised in our communities. And so far, peaceful protests have not worked. They haven't changed the systemic problems in these departments. So now, when we just watch this guy, George Floyd, murdered on television in front of our eyes, again, we have the backdrop right now of coronavirus, and people are out of work, and there's a lot of angst and unrest and worry and stress. And on top of that, we have these police departments abusing their power over and over and over again. And it's not to me, because when I get pulled over, I know all the cops. I work with them in the hospital, so they kind of just laugh and send me on my way. It's disgusting. But these people who don't have the same privilege that I have and that you have been telling us over and over and over again, they're killing us in the streets and nothing is happening. They're not being indicted. They're not being charged because the DA and the coroner's office, and I mean everybody who's involved afterwards to take a look at the body and see what happened and decide whether or not to file charges, they all work together. They don't bring in outside district attorneys or outside coroners or outside sheriff's departments or FBI to investigate these incidents, because it's all one big family, and that's why these people keep getting away with this. Enough is enough. Enough people now, and I'm not just talking about Minneapolis, I'm not talking about California where I live, I'm talking worldwide. Worldwide right now, enough people have said, enough is fucking enough. Something needs to change, and it needs to change now, and it needs to change huge. It needs to be a huge, huge systemic change, because we're not going to take it anymore. 90% of these protests are peaceful. Everyone I've been to, all of my friends, everybody that I've talked to that has been to one have been peaceful. There's always going to be fringe groups who cause problems. I'm not for looting. I'm not for destruction of property, but I understand. I understand these young people don't know where to turn, that they're fed up. They're tired of watching their sisters and their brothers and their friends and their cousins and their moms and their dads and their kids die on the streets and nothing happens. I get it. I understand. If a Target burns down or if a fucking police department burns down, I'm not losing any sleep over that right now. What I want is this movement to keep getting bigger, stronger, enough allies that can say, we are the majority. For those of you who feel differently, you're now the minority. And you're going to listen to us now. That's where I'm coming from. I know my white privilege. I'm disgusted by it. I'm ashamed of it. I'm ashamed that when I get pulled over, I look up and it's someone I know, and I know, I never have to worry, ever. But I know a lot of people who do. I love a lot of people that I worry about every single time I see them walk outside and step into the street. And Humboldt is pretty chill. We have a pretty decent police department here, but I've also sat in that emergency room and worked right alongside officers as I'm helping hold somebody down in the middle of an emergency or something, and I know that person has been mistreated by this cop. It's It's got to change from the inner department and work its way out. We need a whole overhaul of the system. So when you say, or write, or put this out there, how come we can't just have peaceful protests? This is why. Those are just a handful of names off the top of my head. I mean, I guess I could just pull up a Google search on the past 50 years. And those are only the ones that we've heard about, the ones that we know about because of video or because there's proof or witnesses or something like that. Think about all the people who we'll just never know. We'll never know. And their families have been screaming it from the rooftops, and nobody listened, and nothing changed, and there was no justice for their family, no responsibility from the police department, and no accountability for the officers that did it. The training is wrong, and that absolutely has to be overhauled. And so at this point, this is where we're at. There's an uprising worldwide, and there needs to be. And the little bit of violence and looting that is happening it's not indicative of this movement as a whole. And if you're going to concentrate only on the fringe of a very powerful and meaningful and timely movement, then you're not looking at the actual problem and looking for real solutions.